All right, let me start with something that sounds completely ridiculous, but bear with me because nature often starts that way. Take a solid object. A table will do nicely. Go ahead and knock on it. Listen to that confident thump. It feels stubborn, dependable, very much there. Now here's the peculiar claim: almost all of that table is empty space. Not sort of hollow, not mostly gaps, but astonishingly, overwhelmingly empty. If you removed the emptiness and kept only the actual stuff, you could shrink that table down to something smaller than a grain of dust. And yet, here's the paradox. You cannot push your hand through it. It resists you. It behaves like a solid brute of a thing. So which is it? Is the table solid or is it empty? This isn't a trick question, and it isn't philosophy for its own sake. It's one of those wonderful contradictions that tell you you're standing at the edge of understanding something real. The kind of contradiction that made physicists rub their eyes, swear a little, and then go back to the chalkboard. Now imagine we could do a little experiment together. Nothing fancy, no billion-dollar accelerator, just curiosity. Let's zoom in. Not with a microscope, not even with one of those heroic electron microscopes that make scientists feel proud. Let's zoom in all the way. Smaller and smaller. Past cells, past molecules, past atoms themselves. When you first meet an atom in school, it's often drawn like a tiny solar system, a nucleus in the center. Electrons politely circling around it like planets. That picture is already a lie, but a useful lie, like saying the sun rises, when you know perfectly well it's the Earth doing the moving. Still, even that simplified picture gives you the first shock. The nucleus is tiny. Ridiculously tiny. If an atom were the size of a cathedral, the nucleus would be a gnat buzzing somewhere near the altar. And the electrons? They'd be whizzing around out near the walls. So what's between the nucleus and the electrons? Nothing. Well, almost nothing. And that almost is where all the fun begins. Here's the puzzle that should make you uneasy. If atoms are mostly empty space, and your hand is made of atoms, and the table is made of atoms, then when you push your hand against the table, why don't the empty spaces just slide through each other? Why doesn't your hand pass right through the table like two ghosts having a polite disagreement about who gets the hallway? People sometimes say, it's because atoms repel each other. That sounds comforting, like we've solved it. But then you have to ask, how do they repel each other if there's nothing there? What's doing the pushing? And now we're in business. You see, our everyday intuition is built from things that are already large and complicated. Chairs, rocks, water, cats, these are not fundamental. They're the end result of an enormous conspiracy of tiny things behaving in just the right way. When we try to apply common sense directly to atoms, it's like trying to understand a symphony by staring at a single violin string and asking why it isn't loud enough. Let me make it more personal. I once had a student, bright fellow, who said, I just can't believe that matter is mostly empty space. It feels solid. And I told him, that's exactly the point. Physics isn't about what feels true. It's about what is true, and then figuring out why it feels the way it does. Because here's the secret punchline, and I'll give it to you early so you can worry about it properly. Solidity is not about stuff being packed tightly together. Solidity is about rules. It's about laws. It's about what is allowed to happen and what is absolutely forbidden. Think about magnets for a moment. You can press two north poles together as hard as you like, and they simply refuse. There's no obvious thing between them, no visible rod or spring. Yet the resistance is undeniable. The magnets don't care about your opinion. Something invisible pushes back. Now scale that idea down to atoms and make it vastly stronger, vastly stranger. When your hand meets the table, it's not nuclei crashing into nuclei like billiard balls. That almost never happens. Instead, it's clouds of electrons, the fuzzy, probabilistic presence of them, responding to each other in a way that the universe simply does not permit to be otherwise. The electrons rearrange, resist, protest. And the laws of quantum mechanics stand there like a strict bouncer saying, no, you may not occupy the same state. Try again. So the table pushes back. Not because it's full, but because it's obedient to a set of rules written deep into reality. And suddenly, empty space doesn't sound empty at all. Because what lies between atoms is not a void in the everyday sense. It's not a cosmic vacuum cleaner waiting to be filled. It's a stage, a very active stage. A place where electric fields stretch their legs, where quantum waves interfere with themselves, where probabilities swell and shrink, and where impossibilities are enforced with iron discipline. This is where things get deliciously weird. If you were small enough to sit between the nucleus and an electron, don't ask how you'd breathe. You wouldn't see little beads whizzing around on neat tracks. You'd see something more like a blur of possibilities, a kind of restless hum, not particles here or there, but tendencies, chances, likelihoods. The electron is not at a point, it's smeared out like a bad photograph of something that refuses to hold still. And yet, despite all this vagueness, the results are precise, spectacularly precise. The energy levels of atoms match calculations to absurd numbers of decimal places. Lasers work, chemistry works. You work, so now we're left with a deliciously unsettling thought. The space between atoms is governed by rules that are stricter than steel, even though the stuff there is softer than a ghost. Matter is solid not because it is packed, but because it is forbidden to behave otherwise. Once you see that, you can't unsee it. Every time you sit in a chair, you are being held up by emptiness and law, by nothingness that refuses to let you fall through. And if that doesn't make you curious about what nothing really is, then physics hasn't yet had its way with you. Shall I keep going? Good. Because once you accept that emptiness can push back, the next natural question is, what kind of emptiness has rules? Ordinary empty space doesn't complain when you walk through it. Air moves aside. Even water, which feels firm when you belly flop into it, eventually gives way. But the space inside matter, that space behaves differently. It's opinionated. Let's do another thought experiment. Those are cheap and don't require safety goggles. Imagine you could take a single atom and place it on a table all by itself. Just one. No neighbors. No crowding. You'd expect it to be lonely and uneventful, but it wouldn't be quiet at all. Inside that atom, things are already in motion. Not motion like marbles rolling around, but motion in the sense that the atom refuses to sit still in any classical way. This bothered people terribly when they first figured it out. You see, if electrons were just little particles orbiting the nucleus, they'd behave like planets. And planets, unfortunately, lose energy. They spiral in. If electrons did that, every atom in the universe would collapse in a fraction of a second. No chemistry, no stars, no us. A rather short-lived cosmos. So something else must be going on. Instead of tidy orbits, electrons behave like waves. Or if you're feeling cautious, like things that sometimes act like waves and sometimes like particles and refuse to explain themselves when asked directly. The important part is that a wave cannot be squeezed arbitrarily small without paying a price. If you try to confine it too tightly, its energy shoots up. Nature charges rent for confinement. That's the first clue about what exists between atoms' energy. Not energy as a substance you can scoop up, but energy as a condition, a tension, a kind of restless bookkeeping requirement of the universe. Here's an analogy that's not perfect, none are, but it's friendly. Imagine a guitar string. When it's loose, it flops around lazily. Tighten it, and suddenly it vibrates faster, sings higher notes, resists further tightening. You don't see stuff appearing between the pegs, but you feel resistance. The tension is real even though it isn't a thing you can point to. Electrons are like that, except instead of a string, it's space itself that's under tension. Now suppose you bring two atoms close together. Their electron clouds begin to overlap, not collide like cars, but overlap like ripples on a pond. And here's where the universe shows a bit of personality. There's a rule, an unbreakable one, that says certain electrons are not allowed to be in the same condition at the same time. No sharing, no exceptions. This isn't a suggestion, it's enforced with cosmic stubbornness. So as the atoms approach, the electrons are forced into more confined states. That raises their energy, and higher energy in physics often means push back harder. The atoms resist closeness not because they bump into something solid, but because pushing them together would require the universe to violate its own accounting rules. It refuses. That refusal is what you feel as solidity. Now notice how strange this is. You are sitting on a chair because electrons elsewhere in the universe are being prevented from doing something they might otherwise like to do. Your comfort is enforced by an abstract rule, a rule with no regard for upholstery. Let's make it even stranger. If you remove all matter from a region of space, no atoms, no particles, you might think you finally arrived at true nothingness. A clean, honest void. But even that space isn't empty in the way your intuition wants it to be. Fields remain, electric fields, magnetic fields, and deeper still, quantum fields, things that exist everywhere, whether you invite them or not. Particles are just excitations of these fields, like little ripples. The ocean doesn't disappear when there are no waves. It waits. Between atoms, these fields are very much present. They hum quietly, even when nothing obvious is happening. They fluctuate. Tiny, temporary disturbances pop in and out of existence, borrowing energy and paying it back quickly enough to avoid punishment. The vacuum is busy even when it looks bored. If that sounds like cheating, you're not alone. Physicists complained about this too, but the calculations work. And worse, for our sense of comfort, they predict real, measurable effects. Forces that exist purely because empty space is not truly empty. Small forces, yes, but undeniable ones. So now, between atoms, is starting to look crowded: waves, fields, probabilities, rules, prohibitions, and a background buzz of activity that never quite shuts up. And yet, despite all that, it still doesn't behave like ordinary matter. You can't bottle it. You can't weigh it directly. You can only infer it from how atoms behave when they get too friendly with one another, which leads to a wonderfully mischievous question. If most of what we experience as stuff is really the behavior of space under rules, then what exactly is matter? Is it the particles themselves, or is it the choreography they're forced to perform? At this point, the old picture of atoms as tiny beads swimming in emptiness has completely fallen apart. What we really have is a universe where emptiness is structured, disciplined, and energetic, where nothing has properties, where the absence of matter still obeys laws and exerts influence. And that should make you uneasy in a productive way, because once nothing starts acting like something, you have to rethink what you mean by existence. And that's where the real trouble and the real fun begins. Want me to keep going? All right. Now we've arrived at the point where the words start to misbehave. This is usually a good sign. Up to now, we've been getting away with talking about electrons and atoms as if they were things sitting in space, with space politely surrounding them. But the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to say which is the actor and which is the stage. Space doesn't just host matter, it participates. Sometimes it even takes the lead role. Let's go back to that electron for a moment. The poor creature that refuses to sit still. If you ask a perfectly reasonable question like, where is the electron right now? Quantum mechanics gives you an answer that sounds evasive, but is actually precise. It tells you the probability of finding it in various places. Not a blur because we're ignorant, but a blur because that's all there is to say. This drives people crazy. They say, surely the electron is really somewhere. We just don't know where. But when you do the experiments carefully enough, devilishly carefully, you find that nature does not cooperate with that story. The electron does not carry around a secret address that it's hiding from you. The fuzziness is not a flaw in our knowledge, it's a feature of reality. So what exists between atoms is not just empty space with some rules layered on top. It's a region where the idea of location itself has to be treated gently. You can talk about where things are, but only within limits set by the universe. Push too hard for precision, and nature pushes back by injecting uncertainty elsewhere. This isn't philosophical hand-waving. It shows up in numbers. If you squeeze an electron into a smaller region, its momentum uncertainty increases. That's not because it gets annoyed, it's because waves behave that way. And electrons, inconveniently, are waves when it matters most. Now think about what happens when atoms form a solid. You don't just have one electron behaving badly, you have trillions of them, all constrained, all obeying the same rules, all refusing to share certain states. The result is a collective effect so robust that you can build bridges on it. The hardness of steel, the rigidity of diamond, these are not properties of individual atoms. They're emergent consequences of quantum rules applied in mass. Emergence is a polite word for something new appears that wasn't obvious from the parts. It's like traffic. No single car contains a traffic jam, but put enough cars together with a few rules, and suddenly you have rush hour. And you can't explain rush hour by pointing to one bumper. Between atoms, emergence is happening all the time. The space fills, not with matter, but with constraints, with allowed states and forbidden ones, with energy landscapes that electrons must navigate like hikers who are not allowed to step in certain valleys. And here's the counterintuitive part that always makes me smile. The reason matter takes up space is not because the atoms themselves are large, but because the rules governing them are restrictive. Matter occupies volume because the universe says you can't all be here in the same way. It's not crowding, it's etiquette. Now let's push this further because physics rewards audacity. Suppose you keep squeezing matter harder and harder, not just pushing on a table, but compressing things to truly ridiculous densities. In ordinary materials, electrons resist first. They're the ones enforcing space. But if you push hard enough inside white dwarf stars, for example, even that resistance gives way. The electrons are forced into higher and higher energy states, until their pressure alone holds up an entire star against gravity. That's not metaphorical pressure. That's the same quantum refusal you feel when you lean on a wall, scaled up to astrophysical proportions. A dead star stays inflated because electrons cannot all agree to be the same. And if you push even harder, say in a neutron star, you overwhelm the electrons entirely. They get squashed into protons, making neutrons. Now it's neutrons enforcing the rules. Neutrons which also obey similar prohibitions. The star becomes a giant atomic nucleus, held up by the same principles that keep your chair from collapsing under you. So the stuff between atoms doesn't just explain tables and floors. It explains stars. It explains why the universe has structure at all. At this point, it becomes impossible to maintain the idea that space is merely an empty container. Space is active. It has properties. It reacts to what you try to do inside it. It pushes back, not with muscles, but with mathematics. And speaking of mathematics, this is where equations usually enter the room, clear their throats, and demand attention. I won't write them down, but I'll tell you what they say. They say that energy comes in chunks. They say that waves fit only in certain patterns. They say that symmetries dictate what can exist and what cannot. And astonishingly, when you obey those rules, you get a universe that looks exactly like this one. The equations don't describe tiny billiard balls. They describe fields, things that exist everywhere. The electron is not a dot, it's a disturbance in an electron field that fills all of space. The same for quarks, photons, everything. Particles are what happen when fields get excited, like notes on a piano that never stops existing even when it's silent. So between atoms, the fields are still there. They don't switch off when atoms aren't using them. They're like a vast orchestra warming up quietly, ready to produce particles if conditions are right. This leads to one of the strangest realizations in modern physics, what we call empty space. Is the lowest energy state of a collection of fields. It's not nothing. It's the calmest possible something. And calm doesn't mean boring, because even in their lowest energy state, quantum fields fluctuate. They can't help it. Absolute stillness is forbidden. So space itself seethes gently, producing fleeting effects that only show up if you look very carefully, or if you arrange clever experiments that amplify the subtlety. Between atoms, this restless quiet plays a role in how forces work, how charges interact, how particles acquire mass. The vacuum participates. It's part of the calculation. So now if you ask, what exists between atoms, the honest answer is nearly everything that matters. Laws, fields, energy, possibility, prohibition. A structured nothing that is far richer than the somethings it supports. And once you see that, the idea of atoms as little islands in empty space seems almost backward. It may be more accurate to say that space is the main event, and atoms are just the ripples that happen when space is persuaded to do something interesting, which is a dangerous thought, because it leads to the next question, one that no physicist ever asks lightly. If space itself is active, if emptiness has structure, if what we call matter is just a particular way space behaves, then what exactly are we? That's where things stop being merely counterintuitive and start brushing up against the meaning of reality itself.